Hi folks, I'm Pagels-Minor. I'm a product and culture strategist supporting Fortune 100 companies, startups, and everyone in between. I'm also co-host of the podcast, The Drops Podcast, activist, and true tried Southerner. Welcome to my page. So, I'm commonly asked what I learned working at Apple and Netflix and all those types of companies. But the reality of it is, it's not so much what I learned, it's how I ended up at those companies. And that's because about a decade ago, I started to think about what do I need to become an amazing, history-making, wonderful technologist, right? Like, how do I become a Steve Jobs type person? And so when I started to look at those people, I started thinking about the skill sets that they had. The ability to lead amazing teams, get them very focused, have them do consistent work. The ability to have insights that no one else has. The ability to, have confidence in the decisions that you make, even when it looks like it's completely the craziest thing in the world. And so what you started to look at is that not only was it, a skill set thing, it's also experiences, right? So I started to curate and say, I want to work at companies like Cars.com because Cars.com is doing e-commerce in a way that's not the most traditional way, but it's like very fascinating how they were able to go through and create their model. From there, I went to, Sprout Social because Sprout Social was one of the largest, most successful, highest growth startups in all of Chicago. And it was my first $1 billion company. And so from there, I also learned how acquisitions worked. I learned how to merge different teams, all these different types of things. And then when I took the job at Apple, it was because I wanted to understand how a $1 trillion company worked. How do you scale to hundreds of millions or billions of users? How do you scale to 155 countries? How do you scale to 20 different languages? And that's the first time I realized how important things like compliance were. How important it was to look at the nuance of different cultures. Actually, when I took the job at Apple, it was before it was a $1 trillion company. It was just a many hundreds of $1 billion company. But I knew that there was something unique about Apple because they were able to scale to billions of different products across 155 different countries, across 20 different languages. And so I knew that there were things that I needed to learn if I ever wanted to scale my own business or scale any other company I wanted to work at. And so what I learned about from Apple, for instance, is how important it is to have laser focus. Every single year at Apple, the leadership team makes specific strategic decisions, investments, and then those strategic decisions and investments are pushed down through the entire organization. And that's why you can consistently bet that Apple's going to release updates on time. They're going to release their products on time because they uniformly work with their company and get people on the same page. But then the second part of that is how important it is to learn about different cultures, right? If you have a company that wants to scale to many different countries across many different languages, the first thing you have to do is learn about those cultures. For instance, one of my favorite classes I took at Apple was a class on China. I learned that China was actually a virtually cashless society. And it completely changes your perspective on these things, right? Because you start to think, well, if we are going to really be successful in China, for instance, we really need to make sure that we are thinking about technology in a different way because Chinese customers react very differently to certain types of products and certain types of features than some of our other core customers. When we wanted to start being more available in countries that spoke, Arabic or Cyrillic, there you have to completely change the way that forums work. So there's this nuance that, of being very culturally competent that I had never experienced at any other company. And then lastly, how can you scale and do great work when you have a certain amount of complexity in your market? And so that's why, for instance, I wanted to work at Netflix. So Netflix is a very interesting opportunity because they're a B2C product, right? A product that wants to scale and create stories across the entire world. And that's something that's super, 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 super complicated. How can you tell stories in so many different languages that are so universal? And so it really makes a huge difference when you think about that, right? How do you actually do that? And how do you do it in such a way that the stories translate? How do you make Squid Game something that everyone wants to watch across the world every single solitary time? If it's not Squid Game, how do you make the story about Stranger Things? There's something so interesting about that. And then the second part about working at Netflix was how do you create a culture that that permeates through every part of your organization, right? Because culture is by far the most significant thing a company can do, right? How do you make sure that people in everyday actions, from when they first on board to the last day they're there, that they truly understand what is expected of them? And so that's something that only Netflix had a reputation for doing that. So again, it started off with trying to figure out what are the core attributes that I thought I needed to develop to be an expert at what I did. And so, like, what do I do? And it turns out that what I do is help build billion-dollar and trillion-dollar businesses. And that's very different than trying to figure out, like, what career do I want, right? Like, I couldn't start there. What I started off with is, like, what types of challenges do I think I need? What type of challenges do I want? And how can that all be kind of correlated together? And then it started to look like, well, the best way to figure that out was to look at some of these really large-scale companies that do it better than anyone else in the world and actually go to those places and acquire those skills. And then the skills were based on a curated list of the things I thought really great people did. And so what does a really great person look like? It's very simple. It's the people that you read about, right? The people that they make movies about, the people that are in the history books. Like, I wanted to know why Steve Jobs is great. I want to know why Oprah Winfrey was great. I wanted to know how these amazing business leaders and entertainment leaders and culture changers operated. And when you start to look at their skill sets, it just so happened that there were a lot of companies, if I curated my career properly, could specifically give me the types of skills that I needed to be excellent across the board and hopefully one day be one of those people who ends up in the history books. So happy you tuned in today, folks. If you liked what you saw, please like, subscribe, or click the notification bell so you can get my content every day.